Hey everyone, and welcome to Black Moth Radio, the podcast that strives to make working from home work for you, and where every day is Bring Your Kid to Work Day. My name is Robin Bull, and I am your host. I am a full time writer and author. Well, that was repetitive now, wasn't it? Writer and editor. And no, I don't edit my own work. And now you see why. Thank you so much for joining the show today. We're actually going to talk a little bit about a subject that people have asked me several times to discuss, and that is how to write an Upwork proposal clients can't turn down. I get a lot of questions about Upwork and about freelancing in general. By the way, save yourself some hassle and don't call yourself a freelancer. You can call yourself self-employed, call yourself a business owner. Trust me, you'll save yourself a lot of frustration just by not saying, I'm a freelancer. Because people hear the word freelancer and they translate it in their own brain to unemployed. Anyway, the most common question I'm asked is, how can I write an Upwork proposal that can't be turned down? And it's a valid question. Clients have a lot of choice when it comes to finding someone to complete their project. Some are more willing to take a chance on new freelancers than others. So, before we talk about drafting a great proposal, let's talk about what you need to do to screen potential clients. Yes, I said screen potential clients, even if you don't have any clients yet. It's important that you know how to determine if you and the client could potentially be a good fit. The last thing you want in life is to work with someone who is unresponsive, combative, or flat out abusive. It can and does happen even on Upwork. So, before I tell you what to do on how to screen clients, let me tell you what I'm doing with this entire discussion. I'm not necessarily making my decision on whether or not I'll work with a client based on whether they're new to the platform. I'll work with new clients sometimes even if they don't have feedback, but only if I have a good conversation first and I get enough information to verify who they are, and only if they have a verified payment method. That's important because I need to make sure that I'm going to get paid, just like you have to make sure that you're going to get paid. So, for all potential clients, here's what I look at. First, I look at the details of the job, but I'll talk to you more about that in a minute and why that's important. The next thing I do is look to see if there's a deadline listed, because if there is, I need to determine that I can meet the deadline, because deadlines are important. I look at the client's overall feedback score, if they have one. I look at feedback that's been left for the client from other freelancers. I'm looking to determine if the client is unresponsive or hard to work with in some way. I will not work with people that I think could end up being a pain in my butt. Since it's easy for people to put their best face forward in messages, it's important to look at their previous projects and how those went with other freelancers. Next, I look to see if there's a preferred location for the freelancer. Then I look at the average rate that the client has paid in the past. Now, this isn't necessarily a deal breaker. I'm looking both at the average hourly rate and, what they've budgeted, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. But with the average rate, this isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but it can tell me whether they're likely to consider my proposal or if they're likely going to hire someone who lives in an area where their cost of living is lower than mine. I will then look at how many applicants the post has. If there's one opening and 75 applicants, I'm probably not going to waste my time unless I really, 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 really want to work on that project. Next, I check out the date that the client last accessed the job. If the last time the client logged in to look at this thing was like 2 weeks ago, things for them have changed. Their priorities have changed, and that's a red flag because what stops them from dropping off the radar if they do hire someone for that project? I then go and look at how many people were invited and how many people are being interviewed. If just 2 people were invited and only 1 or 2 people are being interviewed, it's highly likely that the job was created just for those specific invitees, and I'm not going to waste my credits on it. So, now let's talk in detail about the details of the job. Before you write your proposal, it is absolutely imperative that you read and understand the job details. You will refer to those details when you write your proposal, so you need to make sure that you read the job description carefully. You need to read it more than once. You need to make sure that it lines up with what you expect out of a project and that what they're expecting matches the budget. It's not always going to match the budget, and a lot of times a potential client may not really know what sort of budget to set. So they might just put a really low number in at the top where, you look at the top and it lists the budget. And they don't know, and they don't really tell you that's what they did in the job description, and that's okay. Don't let that scare you off. If it says expert level and has a decent budget that's set, read the job description and make sure that somewhere in it it doesn't say something ridiculous like $2 per 1,000 words, because that's a problem for most writers. You'll also want to look for keywords and phrases that the client wants you to use when you write your proposal. Make sure that you use those. It helps the client know who bothered to read the entire job, because they don't want to work with someone who can't be bothered to even take the time to read it, because if you can't be bothered to take the time to read and understand what they want, then you're probably not going to give them the result that they want either. So, while you're reading, come up with at least one question to ask about the project. Even if you don't have a question, think of something. Figure out something basic you can ask. The question is an integral part of constructing a great proposal. Think about exactly how you can help them. How can your experience or knowledge directly benefit the client if they choose you? This is not a cover letter that you may be used to sending in for a more traditional job. We're not talking about a cover letter. We're talking about a proposal. And so, in addition to telling them how you can help them, you need to make sure that it's focused on them and that they truly understand how to translate your experience and your knowledge directly over into results for them. So, let's talk about writing a great Upwork proposal. Now that you've decided this is a great job, I think it would be a great fit, I want to submit a proposal, you're in a good spot. But we need to talk about what makes a great proposal. First, a great proposal is not copied and pasted. While it's okay to have one or two basic proposal letters that you can pull from, if they're not customized to the job, the client will know. They will know, and they will ignore you most likely unless they're really, really desperate. If you've been chosen to apply, your proposal will look different than a standard proposal. I want to talk about the proposal for an invitation because, at least in my experience, my proposals are generally shorter. Recently, I was invited to apply for a job for SEO refinement. The client mentioned the content they had was graded as a B- and listed the sort of site, for the industry that they're in. In their invitation, they listed their first and last name, so my reply started with hello, first name. Then I immediately thanked them for the invitation to interview. I told them that I was excited to learn more about their project and that I had I had a question for them. If I have actual questions, I put them directly after my introduction a lot of the time. For this particular job, my question was whether or not they were using a program called ClearScope because they had a grade for their content. Then I asked if they had a deadline for the project. I mentioned that my husband and I use a similar app to what they're working on content for. Generally, I'll go further and talk about previous experience on similar jobs. Right before I close, though, I always tell them that I look forward to hearing back from them soon, and then my sign-off is best, Robin. It's pretty simple, right? So, what happened to that particular job? Well, as is kind of standard on Upwork sometimes, even when you get invited to something, sometimes jobs get closed and they don't hire anyone. Probably a week and a half later, after it was closed, he messaged me and said that they decided to do something else. So, and that's fine. That's, clients are totally able to do that. It's no big deal. So, I keep it short. I address the project. And of course, I talk about anything that I've done that's similar. And if I know about the industry because I use an app like it or I have direct experience, I make sure and mention it. Now, something I did not address when I wrote out my notes for this podcast, and be it for you being invited or just a proposal that you want to submit, you need to make sure that you answer any additional questions that are asked. You guys know the ones that I'm talking about because when you go to create your proposal, it's underneath the box where you would put your proposal letter. Here's the deal. Don't just say in those boxes, go back and read my proposal or go back and read my cover letter. Don't do that, and here's why. Not only is it rude and makes you seem lazy that you just can't answer a couple of basic questions, when clients receive your proposal, they actually receive it backwards. They get the answers to those questions first. So always answer those questions. Always, always, always. Okay? So, for proposals on jobs that you're not invited to, I take a different approach. I always start with a professional greeting. Sometimes I write good morning or good afternoon. I introduce myself. My name is Robin Bull. I'm a top rated full-time freelance writer and editor here on Upwork, and I would love to know more about your project. So I'm showing interest. I've introduced myself. I've said what I do, and I tell them I'd love to know more about the project. Now, if they had one of those keywords or phrases that I mentioned earlier, I would have put it right at the top or used it in the first sentence or, whatever they said to do. Next, I usually ask my question. How often do you need blog posts? Do you generally provide keywords or topics? On average, how many words per post? I ask a lot of questions because I want to make sure that you get exactly what you want. And that's exactly how I word it to the clients. I don't always ask them 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. Sometimes it's just one. And if possible, I try to make it actually related to their project. Sometimes I'll even give them a piece of advice. I will say something like, in my experience working with clients in the past with a similar project, I've noticed that piece of advice here. I do that to show off my expertise and to show the client that, obviously, yeah, I'm on Upwork, so clearly, yeah, I got to get paid, but it's not always about the money. And so me giving them that little bit of free advice helps them see the type of person that I am, and they're more likely to work with me. So, then I go into my education and my experience, but only if it makes sense. I hold a BS in paralegal studies. I worked in insurance defense, bankruptcy on the creditor side, family law, real estate law. I've taught and managed an associate's degree level paralegal studies course for a technical college in Oklahoma City. I taught tort law, civil law, criminal law, legal research and writing 1, legal research and writing 2, advanced communications, family law, trial prep, logic, intro to law, intro to computers, and several other legal classes. I also manage the internship program. I've also managed a satellite law library when I worked at a law school. I have extensive career services experience having worked with both a law school and a major state university. So, that kind of summarizes my education, but I don't always put all of that in there. I will cherry pick. I will, highlight the most important things. If it's a lawyer and they need someone to write blogs for family law or civil law, then those are the things that I make sure that I mention. I may not mention trial prep or that I taught logic or that I even managed the internship program. If it's not someone in the legal industry, I work for one of the nation's top online distance learning providers as well. I contract with them through Upwork, and it's no big secret, but I didn't even tell them I was going to bring them up. So If you want to know who I'm talking about, you're just going to have to go check it out on my Upwork profile. When I first sent a proposal to them, honestly, I wasn't even sure that they would accept it because it was about writing lessons and textbooks. And sure, I have experience because I taught college. But when you're writing lesson plans and textbooks that students are going to read, that, at least in my mind, it was a little bit different. So I took the teaching experience, and instead of I did to some degree rely on the classes because I think the first course I wrote for them was like a criminal justice class, and I taught criminal justice too. But most of my focus went on lesson plan writing and teaching and taking, complex ideas and breaking them down into something that was easy to understand. So that's what I mean about making sure that you take your education and your experience, and I'll talk a little bit about experience, what I say in a minute, and make sure that it directly applies to the job description and can show the client exactly how working with you will benefit them. So when I talk about my freelance writing experience, here's a little snippet of what I sent over to a lawyer who needed someone to write blog posts and to rewrite web content. I've written for several civil and criminal firms in the U.S. and one Irish law firm. That one kind of came out of nowhere. One of my more notable clients is, and of course I name dropped, I am under an NDA with them, although I do have permission to say who they are when I'm talking to other clients. So that's why you guys aren't clients, unfortunately. So I continue to write for them monthly. I also write for another law firm in Dallas. I'm in Oklahoma City, so it works out nicely. I've written site content for a Durham County criminal defense firm, several personal injury firms, and family law firms. I'm also published on lawyerist.com. Finally, I've ghostwritten for attorneys and law offices, several books, articles, and query answers related to law. I'd be happy to send you samples of my work not covered under an NDA. And then, of course, I close with how I look forward to hear back from them. As you can see from that, I'm going straight to the heart of the matter. And that particular client, like I said, wanted someone to write specific blog posts and to rewrite content for their webpage. So I wanted them to know about my direct experience in that area, which is exactly what I told you to do earlier. I went on to say in my proposal as well that I have both an affordable flat rate per post and I also have an hourly rate. And yes, I did end up getting that particular job. So here's what I did not do in my proposal, and in my opinion, this is just as important as what you should do. I did not go out of my way to overwhelm the client with information. It might seem like I did if you don't have any legal experience, but the name dropping and mentioning everything that I did all had a purpose. The client would go and find my work. They knew I had experience. Because it was a law firm, I knew that my paralegal experience as well as my teaching experience would make them happy, since I actually know what happens in a law office. I know the questions that clients and potential clients ask, so it's easier for me to create that content. I did not beg for the job or ask for the job. I basically said, hey, I'd like your consideration. Here's some basic questions. Here's why I want to know the answers to this. And basically it's so they end up getting what they want out of the project. Here's my experience that would definitely be beneficial to you. And I mentioned that I have work under an NDA so that the client knows I'm not adverse to signing one as long as it's reasonable in scope. And then I told them that I looked forward to hearing back from them. Don't bombard the client with demands to hire you or beg them to hire you. Desperation won't get you hired by a good client, but it might make you a sitting duck for someone who wants to take advantage of you. Also, I did not just copy and paste something I previously wrote. I read the job details and I replied accordingly. So, why is it important to ask at least one question when you're writing your proposal? Well, I want to give the client a reason to respond to me. Most people won't ignore a genuine or well-posed question about a project. People love to talk about their needs. They love to talk about themselves. They love talking about their goals. The question is simply a way for me to engage the client. Should you follow up? It's standard behavior to follow up when you've applied and even interviewed for a traditional job. So, should you follow up on a proposal? Well, you can. However, just like with a traditional job, don't make a nuisance of yourself. Wait a few days after you've sent your proposal before you message them about it. Be professional and short in your response. A simple, "Hello, I thought I'd reach out to you and see where you are in your decision making process. Is there anything you need from me?" That's sufficient. That's enough. And it's so simple. So that's pretty much it. Make sure that you read the job description thoroughly to prepare your proposal. Because remember, the goal is to create an Upwork proposal that they don't want to turn down. And they usually turn down ones that, aren't well written, that don't really address their needs, and people who, don't have the right experience. Showcase your experience in education. Address their needs directly. Ask some questions. Don't beg and don't annoy them. What do you do though if you don't have any actual experience? Everyone has to start somewhere, and it can be hard to get the first job or two under your belt. And those jobs generally need to go really, really well so that you can get either recurring work or great feedback. When I started freelancing on Upwork, I was teaching college, so it's not like I had anything previously published. I knew I needed some samples. I started a Hub Pages account and started creating content. I would do it based off of their forums where people would throw out ideas or ask questions about different things, so that's basically how I started with content. I did my best to make my writing as professional as possible because I wanted to make sure that I could show off my capabilities. I wrote one or two evergreen blog posts that I could use as a sample as well. Then, as I started to land work, I'd create a note of where the blogs were posted if they were blogs, and share those as long as I wasn't under an NDA. I also created a few samples of my own that were based on some basic legal concepts and kept them out on Dropbox in PDF form. I also made it a point to update my portfolio section on Upwork and on LinkedIn for a really long time. I don't really mess with those now, at least not the portfolio section. I've logged over 2,000 hours on Upwork, and I have a ton of feedback, so potential clients can kind of get a feel for who I am now and what I do just by, quick glance at all that. But before they could do that, I had to make it easy on them to learn about me and what I could do. You can learn more about portfolios in a 20-minute webinar that I host over on sellfy.com. You can find that on sellfy.com/therobinbull. That is really all I have for you today. I hope that you've enjoyed this. Make sure that you go back and listen to this more than once. Make notes. And knowledge is power, but only if you actually put that knowledge to work. So make sure that you use these tips and don't just store them somewhere in your mind. This is stuff that I do. This is how I became top rated, aside from, of course, meeting the expectations of my clients, which is extremely important as well. Probably talk about that on another day. Make sure that if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or hate mail, that you find me on social media on both Facebook and Twitter. I am the Robin Bull. I'm also on Google+. I have a regular Google+, and a, kind of like a business page. And make sure you head over to confessionsfromthecouch.com and join the community. We have almost 2,000 subscribers there. 2,000, can you believe that? You will learn a lot of great things and some funny things and some terrible things about what it's really like to work from home. So, that is all I have for you guys today. See you next time.